Welcome to episode 4 of the 2005 Supra 21V build. In this episode, we're going to tackle the stereo as well as adding an additional battery to make sure we have enough power for this boat. In this episode, we teamed up with Roswell to tackle the stereo on this boat. The stereo was original 2005, it needed an upgrade, and Roswell has some killer new gear out. To start off, they have some R1 Pro tower speakers where the back of the tower speaker is actually translucent, and then they're lit up with RGBs both on the front speaker side as well as the translucent back, so they light up with the RGB, which is really cool. And the R1 6.5 marine speakers, cabin speakers, also light up. Like the actual part of the speaker lights up. We'll show you. You're going to have to wait until the last episode to see that, but we'll eventually show you guys. It's a really cool way to light up the boat. We also went with an R1 12-inch subwoofer, and we're going to put that in front of the driver, as well as two R1 amplifiers. We have RGB set up from Roswell as well that has a wireless remote, so you can change the colors, you can dance it to the music, whatever you're looking to do. We're going to add a dual zone volume control, so we have access to adjusting the tower speakers as well as the subwoofer without dealing with settings in the stereo and everything like that. We are going to put a new head unit in here, the Fusion MSRA70 head unit. We use it a lot, super easy to use. Garmin has an app for it. Garmin owns Fusion, of course. Garmin has an app for it to make it super functional, super easy to use, and it's just a really great basic head unit for a great value. I'm going to toss this off to Jake. He's going to get going on this build. Thanks for watching.
So that was just 2 bolts to get that off. All right, so both of these wires for our speaker wires pull from our left side over there is what I've concluded. This one over here would have been for the lights, at least what it appears. So I'm actually going to hook up some wire here and here, so that way when I pull through, we have excess pull wire for when we install our new speaker and RGB wire. I always just end up using some duct tape. Duct tape grips really well on the wire, so that when I'm pulling it through, shouldn't let it out at all. All right, there we go. We have 2 new lead wires, and we will be able to hook up the RGB and speaker wires to run from those ports down to that side, down into our passenger side storage area where we will have our amps along with our power management. All right, we now have our pull wires ready to go. We are waiting on that wire to come in for the RGB and the speaker wire. So we're just going to go ahead and get our speakers mounted in the meantime, and then after we do that, we'll get our wire all run and get them hooked up. First thing we have to do is get our clamps on the correct size spacer. I think this one's too big currently. Yeah, so we need to size down on that rubber spacer that's there. It's too small. All right, there we go. So it's just going to be this size right here. All right, and then after that, we can go ahead and adjust the angle of the speaker now, make it a little bit more center. All right, so that's the exact position we want. So we're just going to go ahead and tighten down those adjustment bolts. Okay, so we now have our RGB wire. Well, it's both speaker wire and RGB wire in one loom, and we're gonna run those through where our holes used to previously be. And we will then be able to hook these up to both our RGB controller and our amp. So this loom of wire is a little bit thicker, so I am actually going to end up widening our pull-through hole over here just by about 1/4 of an inch. That way, when I come to pull both wires through, we're not running into issues with clearance or things like that. So I've just got our step bit that we'll use to widen out that hole a little bit, and then our reaming tool to clean up the edges so we're not cutting our wire at all. All right, so we now have all of our port side RGB and speaker wire run. We're gonna go ahead and do the exact same thing on our starboard side. Get that run down the same side of the tower and get it all wired up. This time I'm gonna add some duct tape on the end of this so it's easier to pull out of the tower once it gets all the way through. And putting the duct tape on the end of that tip there made it a million times easier pulling it through this hole than last time. So we're just going to continue to feed it and pull it. If you had someone to help you with this, that'd make it easier, but it's just me here, so. I'm actually probably going to switch these speakers. I think I want the tweeters on the outside rather than on the inside. Okay, I'm going to go underneath now and pull it through the bottom of the tower here. All right, so we went ahead and got all of our wiring run through these towers. We're now going to terminate the end. Our speakers come with a wire adapter here. It plugs into the top, and then the rest will connect up with our 5 wires that are in here. Sorry, 6 wires. So we got power and ground, then power to the RGBs, and then red, blue, and green for those RGBs as well. What we're gonna go ahead and do though is add in butt connectors, heat shrink butt connectors to each of these. The only thing we're not going to do though is we're not going to put all the butt connectors on the end here because that'll make it too thick to put through our 1/2 inch hole. So we're going to actually stagger the heat shrink connectors so that way only one connector is having to go through the hole at a time. That way we don't have to make our hole any wider, and that way it just slides up in there nice and easy. So I'm going to walk you through how I do that. It's really simple. You just space it out based off the length of each heat shrink connector and then do the opposite on this end when connecting it all up together. So we're going to start here with our connector. I'm going to start with the power wire, which is our yellow. And let me double check. So yeah, here on our wiring diagram, white is actually our positive, yellow is our negative, and then black is our power to the RGB. So white is positive, so we'll start off with that. And we won't heat shrink this yet to seal it up. We'll wait till we get it, all of them connected on the tower. All right, so now that we have our white one done, I've been using a Sharpie to mark both where we're going to cut it and then where I'm going to strip it. So now that the white's done, yellow is next. So I lay the yellow wire here. I know I need a small space between there, and then I'm going to cut it here and strip it here. So now I've got my cut and my strip point. So we'll go ahead and do that. So now, as you can see, these connectors are staggered, so when they slide through the hole, they're not stacked on top of each other, making a, larger wire there. So it's going to be the same width wire, and we'll just do the next one below that, and the next one below that, and the next one below that until we're all done with them. So we'll do blue next, then green after that, then black, and then we'll actually have to use a razor blade to cut back some of the sheathing a bit more. So I'm gonna actually do that now. You wanna be careful not to cut any of the wires that are below there. If you do, it's okay. Just make sure you recover them with some heat shrink or something like that, electrical tape. Then last but not least, we have this red one. And as you can see now, everything is staggered. So when this is pulled through the tube, it will, or through the hole to go into the tower tube, it will all fit in there nice and neat. All right, so we're now back up at the tower. We've got our speaker and RGB wire coming through here. We've got our adapter with the heat shrink butt connectors on this end. We're gonna trim back this sleeve that's on here so we can expose the wires. We know it needs to be right about there in length. This is our longest wire, so I'm gonna go just a little bit higher. We're gonna cut back some of that sheathing without cutting into the wires that are behind there. Just pulling that off, exposing all those wires we need access to. So now we'll start working down that wire just like we did how we worked up it the first time. We'll start with our longest wire here, which is our white, which is going to be a power for the speaker wire, which is going to be red on this one. There's a thick red and a thick black wire on this one, and those are going to be our speaker wires. So I'm just going to line it up. I know I need to cut it here. and we'll trim it back. When I do these, always twist the wire. And then I like to prepare, so I stick the butt plug. I stick the butt connector right here, ready to go. Shove in this end of the wire and crimp it down. So we're going to do the same thing, just going cord to cord. So we'll do the next longest one, which is our yellow, which we know is our negative speaker wire. So we've got our black one here. Hang it to the right length. Find out where it needs to be cut. Cut it. Trim it back. Twist the wires. Grab our connector. Put in between our crimper. And crimp it. We're just going to do that all the way down the line. Once we're done, we'll heat shrink all those and seal them up. All right, now all those are done. As you can see, they're all evenly spaced out so they won't go through the hole at the same time. We're going to shrink those up, wrap them in electrical tape, and pass it through the tower. All right, so we got all those shrunk around where they need to be. We're just going to go ahead and take our electrical tape and wrap that all up. They're all sealed, but this just helps protect it a little bit. All right, so now we'll start pushing this cord through and pulling it where it comes out on our other end, section by section. If you have two people, you can obviously have someone pushing and someone pulling, but that is not my situation, so we gotta do it chunk by chunk. All right, now we'll rotate our speaker back down. Get that Deutsch connector plugged in. Those are now ready to be fully tightened and mounted to the tower, and then they are ready to be wired up to the amplifier as well as the RGB controller. All right, now that we have our tower speaker wire run into here, we're gonna go ahead and remove the old amplifier, and we'll be putting in our two new amplifiers. All right, so we got this old guy out of here. We'll put our two new amplifiers mounted on top of each other right there. All right, now that we got our old amplifier removed, we're gonna mount our two new amplifiers. They're a lot smaller than the old one, so they'll both fit where the old one was. We're just gonna go ahead and do one right there. And the other below, like right there. All right, next we're going to be working on our battery kit here. This is going to allow us to have two batteries. It's going to utilize the batteries and then charge them when they're low. It's got the the smart sensing battery charger, as well as the on-off switch here. The on-off has two sides. Side number 1, we're going to be running to our alternator. And then side number 2 here will be running to our accessory panel that's in the boat. So alternator will run in here to our one side on the top. Then from this side, it connects down in here through the switch, and this will go to the positive side of one of our batteries. And then this side over here is going to run to the accessory panel where the ignition switches and whatnot, and all of our accessories, and that'll run down to the B side of our box. These are 2 80 amp switchable fuses, so we can just pop them back in if they ever blow. They're just there for safety. So we're gonna go A side over to this one, B side over to here. This will go to one battery positive, this will go to one battery positive, and then we have our negative bus bar here at the bottom, so all of our negative terminals will hold up here. We've got our 4-gauge wire. We're going to go ahead and run a jumper from here to here, a jumper from here to here, and then we'll make our cords that go from these other posts to our batteries, and then we'll also run our battery connections to this, and then we'll get this mounted in our boat with just some L-shaped brackets underneath the passenger side cubby. This is our Blue Sea system add a battery kit, so that's what we're running with. And the kit itself just comes with these two. I bought the fuses and the bus bar separately. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and mount this panel in here now. I've just got 2 L brackets, and I'm gonna put one right here and one in this bottom right-hand corner. I'm just positioning it now so I know where I want it to go. So we want that one there. All right, so that one will go there. And our other one will go right here. All right, so we got that panel mounted, and now we will be able to run our ground and positive wires to the spots they belong. So ground's going to go down here on our ground bus bar like we talked about before, and then we'll hook up our switch up here and get our alternator hooked up on this side like this, and then we'll run it to the battery, and we'll get our accessories hooked up on this side, another ground here hooked up down here, and it should all work out pretty good then. Now that we have our battery kit installed, we're going to go ahead and wire up our amplifier. I put our wire splitter on here already along with the fuse. So now we're just going to run our power wire to our subwoofer amplifier, and then we'll run a power wire to this amplifier as well off the splitter here. Alright, so now we have both the negatives and the positives hooked up on this. Now we can run our remote wire. We're just going to split it off so that it can run up to this amp as well as this amp and turn on when it's told to turn on. Alright, so we've got our old remote wire here. We're just going to snip off this end, strip it down. And then I've got a new remote wire here split into 2. So we're just gonna crimp that onto the end of this wire. So now we've got 2 wires And I'm gonna pull this. Okay, both of our remote wires are now in. And now we can hook up our speaker wires next. So I've now split my RGB wires from my speaker wires and the loom that was coming down from the tower. We're gonna get our tower speakers hooked up to this amplifier here. It's just 4 wires, one positive, one negative, one positive, one negative. We're gonna strip those back and then just plug them in where they go on the amplifier here. Now that we've got our amps hooked up, our next set of wires that we need to do are the RGBs that run to all of our speakers. We already ran the wires to the speakers, and so now we have the little controller that we're going to get hooked up. We're going to run all the wires behind this panel here and get them hooked up that way. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Plus we're gonna run one more for the subwoofer. So we'll have 6 sets of RGBs total. So we'll run 3 to a post. So we'll take 3 sets and 3 sets and then run them down to 1. So now you can see we've got all of our connections down to 4 connections. We'll make sure to get all these wires cleaned up here and tucked away so that way they're out of the way. And then we will connect that up to one of these sets of terminals on our RGB controller here. Hey guys, now that we have everything mounted in here, I wanted to do a quick walkthrough of how we ended up cleaning up all the wiring and if you had clear up any questions on how everything was run. So we have our alternator. We have our alternator wire running up here. That is going to our side on number 1. There's a return wire going to our battery right here. On the opposite side, we have this wire going to our dash, and it is fused here, and that just runs up and to the positive dash bar. Down here you can see we have everything grounded to this bus bar along with the fuse there, and then so when we turn this on, it's going to combine both those, or allow for the starting battery to start and the accessory to run off the other, and then it will charge based off of necessity for that between the two. And we can combine the batteries if we go to this switch here, if one of them's dead when we're trying to start. Over here you can see we've got our RGB controller with all of our wires neatly installed there. It is powered off of our Blue Sea fuse box we got right here. We also have all of our ballast pumps on that being powered there, and they are all hooked up to 30 amp fuse. You can see we've got our ground and our positive going to our amps here. So this is a splitter, so this one splits it to go to the amp for the tower speakers and then the amp for our subwoofer, and that's for both the ground and the power. And those are all hooked up to this battery. If you have any questions on how we did this panel in here, make sure to let us know in the comments below or shoot us an email and we can clear up any questions you might have. Now that we have our old amps pulled out and the new ones mounted there, we're gonna go ahead and pull out our old head unit. We just gotta unplug everything from behind. I actually went ahead and did some of that already. There's just an antenna and 2 RCAs in the main harness. Once you unplug all that, you're just gonna be able to slide this out depending on what type of radio you have in there. We've got our new Fusion head unit that we'll be installing. This one slides in. It's got a backing plate that we'll put 4 screws into, and it's going to pinch it into position. And then we'll get our new harness hooked up, just the power and the remote turn on, and then the in-boat speakers. The other speakers are going to be run off the amp. And then these RCAs will be running to those other speakers. So we'll go ahead and do that next. There you go. So the new head unit is mounted, still can close the case around it. And we're just gonna go ahead and start working on the harness next. At least with this head unit, all the wires are labeled, so it's pretty straightforward. With the old harness, it's the same colors. So all you have to do is match up the colors that were there previously and go from there. Here's a quick recap on the wiring of the head unit that we chose for this boat, as well as the dual zone controller from Roswell that we went ahead and installed here that controls our subwoofer and tower speaker volumes. As you can see, we've got our wiring under here. It's kind of a mess right now, but we'll get it cleaned up here in a minute. But we've got our wire harness that runs to our head unit. It's unplugged, but we've got our power, ground, and remote wire, which are going to be the most important for this unit. We have our RCA's outs right here for our zones, and we actually just used one RCA out, ran it into our dual zone controller, and then that splits it up with those volume knobs. So we have one running to our subwoofer amp and one running to our tower amp. These will all get zip tied up here. We did add some of the rear speakers into the head unit controls just because there wasn't enough outputs on the amplifiers that we have. So we just utilized those. They just plug right back in here in the back. And they are all good to go there. We'll get these zip tied back up here and everything cleaned up so that it's serviceable in the future if there ever needs to be any upgrades. All right, now that we have our head unit mounted, we're going to go ahead and mount up our new speakers. These are Roswell R6.5s. They have RGB lights, and they're just going to replace the old Pioneers that were in here. Because they have the RGB lights, they have 4 wires for the RGBs, 2 for the speakers. I changed up the connection on these before as a Deutsch connector. I didn't want to pin out another 6 pins for each speaker, so I cut it back and just am using heat shrink. So we've got our speaker wire here, and those are just going to connect up positive to positive and negative to negative. And then you're just going to match up the colors for the RGB wire we ran. Super easy to run that wire, just run it behind all of the walls here and then run it to your RGB controller over by the batteries. So I'm just going to strip these back enough to get them crimped in there. All right, then we'll grab the heat gun and heat shrink those up. All right, now that we got those all heat shrunk up, we're just gonna put the speaker in, make sure it looks straight and screw it in. All right, that's in there nice and tight and straight. Now we're gonna go ahead and do the same thing to the 5 remaining speakers. We are now gonna work on getting our subwoofer mounted. In order to do that, we have to cut a hole in the panel that's right below the driver's seat, and then also put a backing plate on it to reinforce it. So I'm gonna work on the backing plate first. I already got it measured out. We got 17 by 17 here. We're gonna do our hole right directly in the middle, and we're gonna cut an 11-inch hole. And in order to do that, what I'm gonna do is just put a screw here in the middle. Use my ruler that has a hole in it, kind of as a, I don't know what you call that, but just use that to get an accurate marking all the way around, a 5.5 inch radius, or circumference? I don't know what it is. Regardless, we're gonna just drill a screw in there quick and then get that all measured up. There we go. Now we've got a nearly perfect circle. We're gonna drill a hole near the edge so we can get our jigsaw in there, and then just follow that around, cut out the hole, and then go ahead and cut out the backing square. Just gonna drill 2 holes that are pretty close to the edge here. All right, so we got our hole cut. We're gonna go ahead and test fit our sub quick. Looks like we need to go a little bit wider. And that will actually work out perfect. So we're just gonna go ahead and cut that square out now, and then we'll be able to attach it to our plate over there. All right, we now have our reinforcement backing, and we can cut the same size hole in our panel and then attach this on the back. Same exact process as cutting this hole. All right, we now have our hole cut in our panel as well, so we're just gonna go ahead and get this dropped in here. And then we will take that, flip it over, now we will screw her in. All right, so we got those 8 screws installed now. Our subwoofer is fully mounted there. All the screws came through the back. We are going to cut a hole to fit this vent back in so we can get our heater vent hooked back up to this panel, but that'll be next. That wraps up everything for our sound system install. Make sure to comment below any questions you have. We're here to help you walk through the process of this, and we're more than willing to help you out with your projects that you might have going on. Up next, we'll be showing you some of the lighting that was done to this, as well as the rehab of the vinyl and the flooring that we did to this.